So we're on to problem solving, and I've actually been quite ambitious about what we want to cover this morning. So let's just warm ourselves up. Let me know in chat, what are some examples of problems that you're trying to solve right now? What problems are you trying to solve right now? And then we're going to figure out how you're probably solving that problem and how else you might solve that problem. So what sort of problems are you solving right now? It can be anything. Lack of specific experience for a job you want to apply for, how to craft your role, how to scale a new team, the old work-life challenge coming up again. I'm sure I saw that, Rachel, there. Everybody work-life fit, how to progress successfully internally, new career direction, having too much work and not enough hours. Penny, yeah, all been there. I just saw something about rice pudding that really, wait a minute, I got very confused by what was the rice pudding comment? I've lost it now. Just more as somebody who likes rice pudding. I was like, understanding the future of rice pudding. Kat, I feel like I should be your sampler. I really like rice pudding. Very old school, I know. I have quite old school taste buds. I like custard, I like blancmange, I like rice pudding. How to get teams to work cross-functionally, early retirement, building your brand and profile, how to write a good tender proposal. Great. Have one of those. Yeah, I am your dream consumer. I also like Angel Delight. Have your problem in mind as we go through the rest of the session, because then you can apply these profiles and what we're going to talk about to your problem. So just be thinking about, I know what my problem is that I'm trying to solve. Could be a really big zoomed out problem. Where might my career take me in the next couple of years? Or it could be a zoomed in problem. How do I solve this problem this week that's sort of on my mind right now? So Cheryl talks about these 5 different profiles. So I'm going to summarize them, and then I'm going to read the short descriptions that she has in the book for you. So you can sort of go, okay, yeah, that one sounds like me. So I'll just summarize them first. So you've got the adventurer. So let's think of that as like adventuring on top of the mountains. I'm going to think about it that way for now. You've got the adventurer, you've got the detective. So they're being a bit of a detective. You've got thinker. You've got listener. There we go. The listener and the visionary. And one of the reasons I do like Cheryl's work, she's very clear. This is not about labels. This is more about just trying to understand how we solve problems so that we can watch out for bias, which we're going to talk about in a second, but also just try on different practices, different ways of solving problems. Right. So I've got all these ready to read. So I'm going to go through each of them. Just be thinking which one of these sounds most like me, and then we'll do stars on the screen after I've gone through each 5. Right, so are you an adventurer? And here's the little summary of adventurer. So adventurers, you make decisions quickly and trust your gut feeling. When faced with a challenge, big or small, you'd rather do what feels right than spend your time thinking through all the choices. You know who you are and you know what you want to do, so you aren't afraid to go get it. Never have I read a description that feels more like Helen in my life. So there you go, there's Helen, the adventurer. Maybe you're more of a detective. So Cheryl, if you have listened to the podcast episode, and I've worked with Cheryl a bit behind the scenes, she's definitely a detective. So detectives value information and are always on the lookout for facts and data. You don't make decisions based on how you feel. You want to see what the evidence says and you listen to it. You believe that the more you learn and soak in the details, the better you'll do. And you're committed to gathering as much information as you can. So that's the detective. Next one I've got here, thinker. You're a thoughtful decision maker and you resist pressures to make rash decisions. You like to take your time weighing up the options before moving forward, and you tend to look at all the possibilities, wanting to understand the positive and negatives of each decision choice. You don't necessarily need tons of data like the detective, but you do need time and headspace to arrive at the best possible decision. Speed is not your goal, process is. So that's that one. Oh, where's listener gone? Let me just find that one. Just here. Listeners, you've got a whole village of people in your life whom you trust and who support you. When you're faced with a challenge or decision, you know you can rely on your people. They love you and you love them. And it means you always have a plethora of advice ready for you when you ask. You don't have to make a decision by yourself. And then the visionary one. Visionary, you don't like to settle for the ordinary and you like to go your own way. When faced with a clear set of options, you're more interested in finding a different path, something that hasn't yet occurred to others. You keep everyone guessing, and often you surprise those around you with your decisions. So does that feel a bit more like you? And so, yeah, often, Kat, I don't think you have to also limit yourself. You might be like, oh, I'm a bit of this and I'm a bit of that. I'm definitely a visionary. The more I get into it, the more visionary I'm like, oh, that is me. But I definitely have some thinker profiles too. Yeah, I like Glynis's to go, I'm a bit of this with a hint of that. Let's just see stars on the screen. If you were choosing one for now that is the most like you, which one would you go for? Stars on screen, view options, annotate, stamp and then star. And we will give you a survey at the end, or I'll find the link for you from Cheryl. So you can take this for yourself. It doesn't take too long. Just worth knowing, like, how do you naturally solve problems? And where I think this gets particularly interesting is then when you start to look at bias, like what might then get in your way and what might you do differently? Let's just see as a group. We've got lots of lovely listeners. I do read the listener profile and I was reading them in a bit more detail, which is the Helen one again. The Helen one is the adventurer. So it's like, I fix things fast. I make quick decisions. I'm good at making progress. Yeah, that description. Detective. Okay, we've got lots of thinkers. So yeah, thinking through options, being thoughtful, which is great. Some detectives. Okay, so I just want to talk through now the most likely bias when you are solving problems based on your profile. And being aware of these, I think, just means you can watch out for them. So we're not trying to beat ourselves up. We're just trying to think, oh, okay, because I solve problems in this way, this is a watch out. This is a watch out for me. So let me just clear those stars on the screen. Here we go. Right, so if you're an adventurer, your most likely bias is optimism. So essentially you think you're so upbeat, you just think things are going to work out. And so you find the idea that something could go wrong, or maybe you sometimes miss the obstacles, but because you're just like, you're very glass half full, but there are sometimes obstacles and you might ignore them. You might put your head in the sand. There are times where sort of relentless optimism without seeing some of the challenges could get in your way. So make sure, if you're naturally an adventurer, what you probably want to do is think, just make sure I'm seeing the downsides as well as the upsides. So just make sure you've got that kind of balanced view. And we'll talk about how to try on a different profile in a second. For the next one, if you're a detective, your bias here, Cheryl actually calls it framing, but the way that I would remember this one is wood from the trees. So because you've got so much data, because you're looking for data, you then, but what she means by framing is sort of the zooming out. So your bias then becomes, oh, I've looked at all the individual bits, but I'm missing the big picture. That's probably when she's saying frame, she's missing the big picture. You've lost sight of the wood, or you can see the individual trees. And then that can mean that you don't move forward. It can actually mean that you make the wrong decision because you're just sort of seeing all these bits of data, but you're not sort of seeing what they all add up to. So you're not seeing the big picture. So sometimes that's kind of hard to do, that kind of zooming out, if you're very kind of detective minded. If you're a thinker, sort of you can sometimes stay too safe. You can play it safe. I relate to this a little bit. I'm definitely more of a visionary, but because you can think through everything, then almost you sort of go, you can see, you're quite good at seeing risk. So you can see all the shades of grey. And then that sometimes means that you play it too safe. Or the other one that I was reading about last night is loss aversion. You have a more bias towards loss aversion. So let's say you were thinking about changing careers. What might stop you, if you're a real thinker, is you would have a very clear sense of what you'd be leaving behind. You might find it a bit harder to let go of what has gone before. You can sort of, rather than like an adventurer seeing all the good stuff that might be to come, you're sort of going, oh yeah, but what about the good stuff that I'm leaving behind? So loss aversion, sort of playing it safe. Jess, you're an adventurer and a thinker. I like that. You're like, and that's confusing. Well, hey, but that's also, that means you've got agility, right? So it just might be sometimes about dialing up one of these profiles more than another, or just knowing that. I'm a thinker, but I'm also into giving it a try. Also, because we're adaptable, right? So again, we're not trying to go, you're one of these all of the time. I think it's good. I think it's good to be able to do different things. If you're someone who's a listener, this is interesting. I found this interesting anyway. You often put other people's point of view on a pedestal compared to your own. Does anybody recognize that? So you might look at people in senior positions or in authority or just other people generally, and you think their views are more valid than yours. B is like, yes, absolutely. And so you give too much weight to, because you're such a good listener, you give lots of weight to what you're listening to, and then you perhaps miss out on, but what do I think? Like, what do I believe? How do I want to solve this problem? So maybe there's a bit about confidence there, having like confidence in your own ability and your own perspective and your own point of view. Yeah, that's really nice, Steve. Yeah, so I think actually almost acknowledging your bias out loud, I think is really powerful. So when I'm going to talk about the visionary one now, I was like, oh, there's a sentence I can imagine saying now because of this one. So the visionary one, this is the kind of one where you're like, you sort of want to go your own way. You're often quite individualistic. You're great at ideas. Now, going your own way, that sentence is literally in our TED Talk. And that's a sentence that unsurprisingly I wrote. And when I saw that, like, you go your own way, I was like, oh, I believe in that so much. I put it into a TED Talk. So this one is definitely me. And so your bias here that you have to be a bit careful of sometimes is that you can get overly attached to ideas versus what's most important. So let's say I think this is a brilliant idea. I think we should do another book with the Pound Project, just because I think it's a good idea and because maybe I've enjoyed it or it's given me energy. And then I perhaps miss what's important to Amazing If as a whole, because you're visionaries are often quite single-minded, quite determined. Interestingly, when you really start diving into this, when you think about who you work with the most, the other most likely bias for a visionary person is also optimism. You imagine how optimistic Helen and I are together. Now, luckily, I've got a good old dose of cynicism and sarcasm, which I think helps keep us sort of on a level pegging, level field. But we are both actually very optimistic, Helen and I. And so that's just something for us to watch out for. You're running a company together and potentially you both have the same bias. And so you need to bring in a bit of that worst case scenario planning. What's the worst thing that could happen? What do we do if this goes wrong? How are we being smart about managing risk? And we do think about those things a bit, so it's not, we don't, for our team who are here today, who are like, oh my God, do they just think everything's going to be brilliant all of the time? We do actually think about those things, but I think it doesn't come naturally to us. So, there's a difference, isn't there, between what are you naturally good at versus what do you have to work a bit harder at? What do you have to be a bit more intentional about? So let me which I just find helpful. What I like about Cheryl's work is she is very simple and straightforward. And actually, when you read her books, they're quite different to other business books. So for a start, this one that I've got, Problem Solver book, it's very writable in, and she has all of these cheater sheets, she calls them, where she gives loads of examples. So they feel a bit more like a book that you might have had at school or maybe in college. They're quite a different style, but it makes them very readable and very usable. And so this is an example of one of the cheater sheets, which I thought I'd just show you. So I like this summary here, where she's just showing, right, for each of these, here's she calls them archetypes. Here are the strengths. Let's not forget Helen's confidence, speed, and efficiency, the things that I'm just like, that sums her up. And then she calls them kind of blind spots and biases. So optimism, planning, confirmation, and closeness communication bias. So that's getting to recency bias. So it's just sort of knowing those things. I think being able to talk about them and certainly talk about them as a team. I think this is most useful when you talk about it as a team, because then you sort of go, well, what's my natural profile? And what's the profile I practice the least? So I like this idea of combining problem solving and practicing, because then it feels like a skill that we're just sort of getting better at. So when I look at these, if I was thinking, well, which of these do I practice the least? And I would say probably that one. of all of them that I sort of go, I don't put other people, I don't see those blind spots in me, and I probably don't spend enough time listening, and I could probably get more people's point of view sometimes before kind of making a decision. Rachel, you've done the test on the website. You're like, how do I ever make any decisions? Because I've got like a bit of all of those. Yeah. Or you could frame it as, if we look at it a different way, you're just very well balanced. Interesting. Yeah. So actually what Steve's doing a great job there is connecting gremlins, where we started today, with biases. So actually, if you're a real listener like Steve, you probably overweight authority and other people's opinions. So therefore you end up with a bit of a gremlin of like, other people are smarter than me. Other people's point of view is more valid than mine. So this is all just about self-awareness, right? Just knowing ourselves better so we can be better. So know which is the one that you would like to, practice more, that you'd like to try on. And let's use the stars again. Let me know using the cheater sheet. Just put a star in the box here, which is the one that you would like to practice a bit more. Which of those problem solver profiles do you look at and go, yeah, I'd like to do a bit more of that, because I can see how that would be useful for me. Like I can really see how spending a bit more time listening would be really useful for me. People want to be more visionary. Joe, I was rereading. If you do want to be more visionary, I was rereading this week Creative Acts for Curious People, because I was doing some research for Learn Like a Lobster. I think if you spent some time with that book, it would help you to be more visionary and imaginative, because it's just full of have a go at this, try this out, do something a bit different. And we're going to do some of those exercises at our next Squiggly staycation. So I was sending all the name of these exercises to Sarah in our team, who was sort of going, I don't know what any of these things mean, but I trust you. And they encourage that you can do them all individually as well as you can do them as a team. But I think they get you to be imaginative and innovative. Great. Oh, great. It's also a very visual book. So Sam was saying he's got it. I was looking at it and just thinking, I love how they bring all the ideas to life. Cheryl, who did this episode, she's called Cheryl Einhorn, and Curious Creative Acts for Curious People. Caroline's very helpfully has just put the link to that in chat. It's one of those, there's some books that get a permanent place on your bookshelf. For me, that's one of them. And I probably really like it because I'm naturally a visionary. But if you wanted to try that on a bit more, I think it'd be a good place to start. Okay, so we know where we are. We know what we would like to practice. So we're not trying to change. We're not trying to not be brilliant at the things that we do. I do also think if you are struggling with a problem, this is probably why. So, like if you're kind of going, something doesn't feel right. I was talking to a company yesterday that I can't name, but they're a massive brand. And what I really liked about what they told me was they now look for points of tension as an opportunity to solve problems in a new way. And so rather than seeing tension across the company as like a bad thing, or, like feeling tense, that would make me very tense as someone who doesn't like conflict, they're really trying to encourage their people to call it out and go, like this problem is feeling knotty, or this problem we've got stuck, or this is not working. And then almost kind of be like, okay, well, let's use that as an opportunity to like learn why not. Is it because we're all being way too optimistic? Interestingly, Rachel, brave is one of their behaviors. So it is actually, and I think it is quite a brave thing to do. So look for those points of tension and then go, are we solving this problem in the wrong way? Or is there something we need to practice doing differently? So just a few thoughts for you on each of these profiles, if you wanted to have a go at it, what this might look like. So if you want to be, let's say, be more Helen, let's think about her while she's not here. You want to be more an adventurer. The thing that I see that she does so well is prototype. That sort of build without overthinking. Put your project on a page. Just create it. Don't overthink it. Don't worry about whether it's right. Don't worry how much it's going to change. Give yourself a time-boxed way of doing a prototype as well. That's the thing that I see Helen do well. Not only does she prototype, she does it in a very time-boxed way. She will say, I'm going to spend an hour getting this proposal and prototyping what this proposal could look like for Harvard Business Review, and then I'm just going to share it with you. So she just does it really fast. So there's not only a prototype, there's a speed to do with this. Whereas when I prototype, it takes me longer. So like moving forward fast. So time box it, and build something. And you've got to be able to share it with someone. So you can't sort of prototype in your head. You've got to be writing it down. You've got to be visualizing it. It's got to be something you can see. If you want to be more of a detective, I was making myself laugh last night as I was thinking about this. For anybody, I've not started watching it yet because I think it's going to be too scary for me. New episodes of True Detective out at the moment with Jodie Foster. To be a true detective, you need to ask for data points that back up your assumptions, your initiative. So one of the things that you could think about is, what are 3 things that I believe to be true, hence the true detective bit. That's when I made myself laugh. You know, got to keep yourself interested, haven't you? So what are 3 things that you think are true? And what is the bit of data that shows that that is a fact, not a feeling? So marry together your beliefs with your data. So what are the things you think are true? What are the 3 data points that you could point to say, and this is how I know that's true? I think that's really useful if you are quite instinct, you've got good initiative, you're like, I've got a gut feeling that this is a good thing. If you then wanted to sort of do the detective role, you'd have to back that up with proving it, essentially. So be a true detective. If you want to be more of a listener, this is something that I think about all the time and slowly but surely sometimes get better at. What is your listening versus talking ratio? So you probably want them to look like this. So you want your listening to be higher than your talking. Pick a meeting and go, right, I want my listening talking ratio to be 70-30. I actually did this with a client yesterday because in client meetings, when I don't know someone, I tend to talk more. When I know people, I'm better at listening, probably because it's something to do with like being an introvert and getting a bit nervous meeting new people. So I was talking to 2 people I've not spoken to for ages yesterday. And I just remember thinking, my job to do in this meeting is listening. And I probably did get to 70-30. I did loads more listening than I did talking. And a couple of times I very consciously resisted the temptation to do what I wanted to do, which was share my ideas. I was like, oh, I've got an idea, or I know what we could do. And I was like, no, I need to listen to make sure that those, you know, a filter for those ideas. Are they actually good ideas? If you want to be more of a thinker, as I said, thinkers see all of the shades of grey. So do some scenario planning, practice scenarios. So try and think, yes, you can do best case, worst case. I actually think okay case is always really interesting, like what's in the middle of those. Asking yourself, thinkers are very good at asking themselves lots of questions. Okay, well, what would happen if ... or what might this look like? Or what if technology started to work in this way? Then what would happen? So you're sort of asking questions and you're coming up with scenarios. I think usually easier to do this if you've got some propelling questions to start with to sort of prompt those scenarios. If you just go do some scenario planning, it feels a bit vague and you're sort of doing it in a bit of a void. I think I would do scenarios on the back of, okay, what happens if our competition suddenly launch something that kills this product? What are 3 scenarios? 3 things that could happen if that happens? Sort of a if this, then that type scenario planning. And then if you want to be more visionary, maybe use, wouldn't it be amazing if? Wouldn't it be, and think about it for your career, for your job. What are your wouldn't it be amazing if statements? Wouldn't it be amazing if I could progress into this role that has more influence and impact and still work flexibly or in a way that works for me? What are those wouldn't it be amazing ifs? Because it stops you limiting yourself too soon or applying too many constraints along the way. I hope that feels helpful.